I posted a story a couple of days ago about this incident in San Francisco, and I got a lot of people coming in my comments talking about calling it BS and this and that, and how liberal San Francisco is, and that wouldn't happen in such a liberal place. That's all bullshit. You know, racism tries to hide behind words like liberal and left, and that's not the case, though. There's plenty of racism that goes down in these liberal places. I found this story, heard this story a couple of weeks ago, almost forgot about it, and that video right there in the comments in that video I was just speaking on reminded me of it. I had my great grandfather was born in 1894, and he came out of Lake Charles, Louisiana. He was living in Arkansas for a while. In the 30s, he moved out to San Francisco, and he lived there until he died in 93 or 92. He almost made it to be 100 years old. I wanted to do this story to show how we had all of these neighborhoods and were eventually forced out. Okay, let me get into the story. Clayton was once home to a thriving African American, we say Black American. Clayton was once home to a thriving Black American neighborhood. Now it's little known history by Kelly Moffitt, published July 17, 2017. Kelly Moffitt, St. Louis Public Radio, Donna Rogers, Beard, Emma Riley, and Reverend Doris Graham joined St. Louis on the air to discuss the history of Clayton's historical displaced Black American neighborhood. Picture of the affluent St. Louis suburb of Clayton, great schools, flourishing business, a lively restaurant scene. Yeah, Clayton right now is like one of the most wealthiest neighborhoods around here, besides from Ladue and places like that. And it's they have a lot of county buildings out there. You know, you go out there to pay your taxes, county police, courts. It's all in Clayton's. That's where the money's at now. But let's get into how this was once a Black American neighborhood. Okay, but how Clayton came to be synonymous with such commercial affluence is entwined with a little-known part of the suburb's history. From the 1800s to the 1950s, Clayton was home to a flourishing Black American community. The area's Black residents were pushed out of the area through rigorous urban renewal zoning policy to make room construction. No, I think she meant to say to make room for construction of the vaunted commercial center of the suburb. The Black community in Clayton all but disappeared. The neighborhood was bounded by Hanley Road and Brentwood Boulevard, and even more densely populated between Hanley and Bimenston Avenue on Carondelet and Bonhomme Avenues. Today, 8% of Clayton's population is Black American. A short documentary, part of St. Louis Filmmakers Showcase, is called Displaced and Erased, and it's bringing light to the history of Black American community in Clayton, which has been relegated to a single paragraph in a history book. Clayton High School and Washington University grad Emma Riley directed the film, which will be screened, blah, blah, blah. The history of the community. This Black community was part of Clayton's from its beginnings, Riley said. The first postmaster of Clayton was Black, and there was a Black American school called Attucks Elementary. This community was part of Clayton until the 1950s, coinciding with the Brown v. Board of Education Design. In 1954, people started to buy up properties, and then the City Planning Commission of Clayton started talking about getting rid of this area and rezoning it for commercial purposes in 1958. This community was slowly displaced throughout the 50s and 60s and were virtually non-existent in the 70s. The documentary features retired Clayton High School history teacher Donna Rogers Beard and represents a small part of the research she has been doing into the subject for the past several years. Rogers Beard said that at its height, the community was home to more than 300 people. She's been on her research since 1991, combing through archives of the St. Louis Argus newspaper and conducting oral histories after learning more about the Tuck School at the Clayton School District's 100th anniversary party. She hopes to release a book about the subject in the upcoming years. Both Riley and Rogers joined St. Louis on the air, but host Don Marsh to discuss the history of Monday's program. They were also joined by Reverend Doris Graham, who grew up in a historic Black American neighborhood and whose family was pushed out. Memories of the neighborhood. Graham grew up in Clayton in 1940s at 7730 Bonhomme Avenue with her mother and her mother's sister. Those were some of the best days of my life, Graham said. I went to a Tuck school from kindergarten to third grade. Graham said that by the time she was in the third grade, she had moved into St. Louis with her mother. I always kept in touch with my friends and family in Clayton. So when First Baptist Church of Clayton was told they had to move off the Brentwood Boulevard to make room for a high-rise, I'd hear from my aunt, a staunch member of the church who didn't want to move, Graham said. That church began in 1893 and was eventually moved to Union Boulevard and Terry Avenue in St. Louis now. That Clayton property is the site of Bethesda Barclay House, a residence for older adults. There's just no evidence it exists, as Rogers Beard said. You have a whole community all the way to Hanley, and thank goodness now we do have a plaque placed at the site of the older Tuck School. Thank goodness we have a plaque. See, that's what I don't really care for. You know, they give people these little symbolic gestures, these little markers to remember what transpired. That's not enough. What needs to happen is reparations need to happen, because these people were pushed out. That was their home, and they used this zoning to push them out. So, yeah, I'm not a big fan of these markers. I think that cash is needed. I really don't give a damn about no apologies. You can keep your apologies. You know, you need to break that cash off. That's where we at today. Especially when you did somebody wrong, you need to repair that person that you did wrong. Okay, but let me get back into this article. Yeah, I'm against those markers. That's not enough. They're good to help remember what happened, but it's not enough. Why were people pushed out? Clayton, Brentwood, Webster Groves, and Kirkwood all had urban renewal zoning policies during the 1950s that pushed predominantly Black American communities out to make room for newer commercial development. Rogers Beard said that the victims of these policies lost their homes over a period of 5 to 10 years. Oh my goodness, that's quick. 5 to 10 years? Probably been there their whole life and lose it in 5 to 10 years. We see it first happening with property being bought and then finally zoning laws and eminent domain, Rogers Beard said. Homeowners were paid for the property, but Raleigh said that payment doesn't paint a full picture of the situation. And the property, they probably didn't receive the money that they deserve for that property, because the property right there now is extremely high. And they probably paid them pennies for their property compared to what it's worth now. Okay, but let me get back into this. If you look at what that property is worth now, yeah, that's what I just said. If you look at what that property is worth now, what these people lost out on, and the fact that they didn't want to leave, and I think that has implications for how wealth is transferred from generation to generation, Riley said. Absolutely. These weren't just black people who were renting, they were property owners. So many people acquire wealth and come into wealth by transferring property down the line. Exactly. Heartland Bartholomew and Associates was the architectural planning firm responsible for presenting the plan to raise and commercialize the area of the Black American neighborhood. Rowley said the firm was known nationwide as an organization that talked about the dangers of slums and made plans to replace housing for poor and predominantly black communities. That's amazing because where I lived, there was no slums up and down Bonham and Carondelet said, Graham, you know, people make up things to get what they want. That's exactly what they do. They label it a slum and call, you know, the area a problem area or a nuisance. And that's not the case at all. They just want the property and they got the property. And now they need to pay for what they did to those people that lived in that area. Rogers Beard said that in the 1800s, Clayton was actually ahead of his time because white and black students went to school together. It wasn't until a newer school was built that black American children were segregated into the one room, a Tuck school, which was reintegrated in the 1950s. Ironically, Clayton was one of the first school districts to become part of the region's voluntary desegregation program in the 1980s. Rogers Beard would welcome black American students who entered Clayton High School's doors by saying, "Welcome home." I would tell them Clayton was once had a black community. You are not the first. Yeah, okay. Good story. And I like what she said about how the property, they were paid for the property, but the value of the property today is much higher than what the people were actually paid then. And that's how they do it. They deem the black community's property less valuable as they view their own. That's a part of redlining. And then you got this zoning, and it's just another example of the places we once lived and thrived and flourished being taken away from us. All right, you trolls, you have at it in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one.